Hello, good evening, and welcome to a new episode of arguably the reading quest. So, today, the book I'm going to talk about is A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. But before we start, I do not usually recommend, what publication should you or which publication should you buy from. But this is one such, book where I think publication matters a lot. And if you really want to, read into details of such a seemingly complex novel, A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, so I'll prefer that you should go for Norton Critical Editions. Why Norton Critical Editions? Because they're full of copious notes, footnotes, literary analysis, literary commentary, the influences on the various forms of art which this book extends its influence to. So I believe you can buy Norton Critical Edition, and then you can enjoy reading. So James Joyce needs no introduction, but while he is glorified and rightly so for Ulysses, he will be loved for forever for A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. This is a paradigmatic novel which has sadly been reduced to nothing more than a cliched name in university syllabuses, which neither the professors teach nor the students properly understand. And this novel clearly marks the birth of our own age of literature, a writing which also marks the birth of artist heroes, misunderstood loners, contemplative recluses, introvert bohemians, and clearly demarcates the literary and the cultural world into two halves, before the birth of the portrait and after the birth of the portrait. I once asked my English language teacher that, sir, a question that was posed by a Marxist scholar to me, that is Joyce's portrait overrated? And what did he reply? He answered that how will you rate something for which the scales have not yet been invented, nor the parallels have yet been found? And if my memory doesn't fail me, he used a word specifically that describes Joyce's writing, and that is gibberish. Yes, to my utter surprise, he used the word gibberish, which the Reader's Digest, which this book, the Reader's Digest, a modern guide to synonym, defines that gibberish emphasizes the unintelligibility of difficult or esoteric expression, which may sometimes be a gobbledygook. Gobbledygook means language that is meaningless or is made unintelligible by excessive use of technical terms, or sometimes a terminology or a language with which one is unfamiliar with. This is from page number 245, 1969 edition. But before I delve deeper into what a portrait is, let me start by reading out a quote. He did not want to play. He wanted to meet in the real world the unsubstantial image which his soul so constantly beheld. He did not know where to seek it or how, but a permission which led him on told him that this image world, without any overt act of his, encounter him. They would meet quietly, and if they had known each other, had met their tryst, perhaps at one of the gates or in some more secret place. They would be alone, surrounded by darkness and silence, and in that moment of supreme tenderness, he would be transfigured. He would fade into something impalpable under her eye, and then in a moment he would be transfigured. Weakness and timidity and inexperience would fall from him in that magic moment. So this is one of the most personal of Joyce's work, that can be very well categorized as one of the kinds of Bildungsroman, where a protagonist character is traced from childhood to adulthood. And this is one such book where Joyce experiments with language, with a lot of medieval thoughts and ideas, and the world was clearly at the helm of a major change. Modernism was born, but what defines the world around us was clearly not demarcated from the old order. So the old order was collapsing, and the new order was not yet born completely, and there was a clear-cut transition. So the pain of the labor, the pangs of the labor, can be clearly felt. So I would directly like to quote what another scholar, Umberto Eco, says of this book. So among the numerous cultural influences upon the young Joyce, we note three major lines which appear in all his work. On one count, we find the influence of Thomas Aquinas. Of course, this work is full of the references of Thomas Aquinas, a very iconic scholastic thinker, thrown into crisis but not completely destroyed by the reading of Bruno, and on another the influence of Ibsen, which call for closer tie between art and life. Finally, we note that the influence of symbolist poets, especially the late 19th century French poet, including Paul Verlaine, Arthur Rimbaud, Stephen Mallarmé, okay, who reacted against realistic and naturalistic descriptions of external reality by producing poetry using subjective language and private symbols. So a lot of symbolism is here, with the aesthetic ideal of a life devoted to art and of art as a substitute for life, and with their stimulus to resolve the great problem of spirit in the laboratory of language. And these contrasting influences from different centuries were assimilated within a framework that grew increasingly concerned with the problem of contemporary culture. From the psychology of the unconscious to the physics of relativity, the staggering quantity of Joyce's reading and the diversity of his interest opened the way to his discovery of new dimensions of universe. So this novel starts with, of course, this is the portrait of an artist writing the portrait of an artist. So it starts with a very obedient, subservient child who was nurtured into a Catholic school of thought, whose family was a religious family, and then he was sent to a boarding school where he was studying to become a priest or take up similar jobs in church. But then, as he grew of age, as the novel progresses from beginning to end, somehow, Joyce experienced multiple epiphanies. Epiphany is not in the sense of religious awakening, but a very secular notion of the term epiphany, wherein he rejects anything and everything that doesn't interest him, which is not his inner calling. And then he tries to fly above the net of nationality, language, religion and culture, and to find his own aesthetic ideal that is his own aesthetic ideal that is that was very difficult to define in the materialistic world of his. I again repeat, and this novel is very significant because this clearly marks the birth of our own age of literature, a writing which also marks the birth of artist heroes, misunderstood loner, contemplative recluses, and introvert bohemian. And without reading James Joyce's portrait of the artist as a young man, we cannot understand the age that clearly demarcates the old age from the age of our. So it was the artist hero has arrived, and it was only and only because of James Joyce. Had it not been for James Joyce, the so-called artist heroes would not have arrived. Let me explain you what epiphany is as per the editor of this book. So in portrait, the epiphany is no longer an emotional moment that the artistic word helps to recall, but an operative moment of art. It founds and institutes not a way to perceive, but a way to produce life. At this point, Joyce abandons the word epiphany, for it suggests a moment of vision in which something shows itself. What now interests him is the act of the artist who shows something by a strategic elaboration of the image. Stephen truly becomes a priest of eternal imagination, transmuting the daily bread of experience into the radiant body of ever-living life. This is what epiphany is. Now, at the end, what Umberto Eco says, that this conflict between the world and the aesthetic ideal that the artist is trying to find for himself will be fatally repeated in multiple forms as the novel progresses from beginning to end. It is the conflict of a traditional order, I quote Umberto Eco verbatim, and a new vision of the world, the conflict of the artist who tries to give form to the chaos in which he moves, yet finds in his hand the instrument of the old order, which he has not yet succeeded in replacing. So James Joyce knew this, and in fact a portrait does not claim to be the aesthetic manifesto of Joyce, but the portrait of a Joyce who no longer existed when the author has finished this ironic autobiographical sketch. So please enjoy reading this book. I hope this book can do wonders for you in terms of language and freedom of thought if you manage to read it. Thank you so much.